You'll see.
Hi, how are you? Nice to see you. As I smack them on the back. They always come in bellowing and slapping people. The carrying's on. I guess I can give this man a nice hug. And I won't hurt him. Is Kathy here or no?
No.
No, yeah. I didn't think so.
All right, it's almost 7. I'm going to take a seat.
Okay. Yeah.
Why are you making that face?
Trying to roll this out to raise
Pretty good. I did. Wow. If I'd known this, I wouldn't have eaten it. Yeah. Chance to eat again. With this,
mean, I do that.
Well, good evening. We had plans of more would be here, and at least more called in. Maybe people on the way, but we're going to get started because we want to reward those who came early. All right? So we're going to pray, and then I'm going to ask Mrs. Rivera if she would come up and share a minute as a parent. And then I'm going to give a presentation. And then we'll close it off with another presentation from the alumni. And then we'll be done around 8 o'clock. Now there's food back there as well. So you can grab something to eat. I'm going to pray and then feel free to grab something to eat, because we don't want to take that food home. So let's pray together. Father, I thank you tonight for the opportunity to come together as a school family and to share a little bit about what we're looking to do in the future, if you should will. And we thank you for what you have accomplished in the past, and we look forward to what you have in mind as we look forward. May your hand of blessing be upon each one who has gathered here this evening. May you be pleased by what transpires here tonight. Be with each one who shares. In Jesus' name, amen. We'd ask Mrs. Rivera that she would come and just share a brief word with you as a parent looking at her little venture here at Christian School. So come to share with us a little.
Hello, good evening. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Sandy Rivera. I'm a mother of 2 girls that come to this school. I have Hannah, who is in 6th grade, and I have Olivia, who is now in 3rd grade. Olivia started here in kindergarten. Hannah started in 3rd grade. I knew I wanted my girls here since before I had my girls. I remember driving by and seeing the sign PVCA, and saying, you know, that's where I want my kids to go, even before I knew I was going to have kids. But as a Christian, I knew that that's, you know, where I wanted my kids to be. I wanted them to know and be taught in school the same principles, the same morals that I was teaching them at home. Then my husband and I moved to Wilbraham. We bought a house in Wilbraham, and I thought, oh, good school system. Well, it wasn't that good. It was just different. We were there for, Hannah went from preschool to 3rd grade. And then at 3rd grade, my husband and I separated. So I had to decide if I wanted to stay in Wilbraham and be a slave to my home, and you know, keep my daughters in a good school system, or move back to Springfield, where my parents own a home. But I knew that if I moved to Springfield, I couldn't put my kids in the Springfield school system. I mean, I was born and raised in Springfield, but we can't compare those years in school to these years now. And so I had to decide, okay, do I stay in Wilbraham and slave over my home and keep my girls in an okay school, or do I move back to Springfield and work for their education? And so I said, no, I want them in a good environment. So chose to move back to Springfield, where I decided to put them in this school. It's been a sacrifice. It hasn't been easy as a single mom with no help. You know, I pretty much work for their education, for their tuition, but it's a place where I know my girls are learning about God and having a relationship with God. I wanted my girls to know who God was, not through my testimony, not through who I know Him to be, but for themselves. And so I have seen my girls grow spiritually, emotionally, mentally. You know, they're not perfect kids, but they're in a good school with good teachers. I remember when Hannah started in 3rd grade, right after my husband and I separated, she was having one of those tough times, a meltdown, and she said to her teacher, and really, Mrs. Chabelli, she had retired this year, said, you know, I'm really missing my dad. And so Ms. Chabelli said to her, well, do you want us to pray? And so she prayed with my daughter, and my daughter came home and she told me, and she said, and I said, really? And she said, Mom, I felt so much better. And although maybe not all the kids that come here are Christian, the teachers are. And so to me, that's comforting that when I put my girls on the bus in the morning, that I know that they're in a good, safe, happy place where, you know, the teachers and I come here, and I remember when I came here for like the orientation to see the school, I knew when I walked in, I said, this is where I want my girls, because I felt the peace. I felt such like, that peace that surpasses understanding, and I said, I know this is where, and I have to be honest, I kind of went back and forth. I'm like, okay, can I do this? No, I can't do this. I should just leave them there. Yes, I'm going to do it. No, I can't. So I remember, like, probably 3 days before school started that year, I said, you know what, Lord, I'm going to close my eyes and I'm going to dive in. I'm going to trust in you. I'm going to leave it all in your hands. And I know that I can't do this, but I know that you can. And every year, I say the same thing, because I'm like, okay, I know that I can't do this. And in my natural man, I know that I can't. I know, I mean, I have friends that say to me, I would love my daughter or my son to go to that school, but I don't know that I can do it. And I said, if I can do it, I work part-time. I don't even work full-time. I work part-time. I go to school part-time, and I have 2 daughters here. And so I know that, and I tell them, if I can do it, I know that you guys can do it, because it's the best place for my children to be. Actually, my 8-year-old daughter the other day said we had done our prayers at night, and she said, I rolled over, and she said, Mom, can you do the prayer of salvation? And I kind of turned around and I said, what did you say? And she says, I want to accept Jesus into my heart as my Lord and Savior. Now, this is my 8-year-old. And so on the 6th, our church is doing a baptism. And so we were in church, and the pastor was talking about, you know, he was going to have a baptismal, whoever wanted to do this. And she looks over at me, and she says, get baptized. And I said to her, do it? And she said, yes. And these are things that have come out of her, you know, and these are things that, yeah, I have instilled in her, but the fact that they come here, it's almost like a safe haven where I don't worry about them, but I know that they're getting fed, and I know that they love the Lord and they're happy. Yesterday was the first day of school, of course, and I spent all day nervous, and I'm like, okay, I wonder how it's going to go. It's a new grade, they're new teachers, and my daughters came home, and I waited for them out the bus, and I was like, so how'd it go? And they're like, it was awesome, it was this. And I'm thinking, did you go to school today? I said, okay, it's great, it's wonderful, and that's something that I think that a lot of parents who don't have kids in good schools can say about their kids, or their kids can say about the school. And so I encourage you all to stay encouraged and to, you know, let's come together, because I feel like this is like a family. I can say, you know, I remember when I first started coming here, I used to tell my friends, oh my God, I went to the school to pick up my girls, and I felt like I was in church. And so because everybody's like, hello, hello. I mean, I remember I would go to the Wilbraham school, and people would kind of like look at me like, And I thought, you know, I pay my taxes, I'm like everybody else. And so, you know, you kind of, because you have the cliques and the cliques. And here I felt like we were all a family. And my daughter, to finish, she played soccer, my oldest daughter, and last year she had a concussion. And so she had to be out a week. And she drove me to want to give myself a concussion. I banged my head against the wall, because every day she's like, Mom, I want to go back to school. Mom, I want to go to school. And I said, Hannah, it's only a couple more days, just use it to relax. And she said, no, but I miss my family. I said, we are your family. She goes, no, my other family. And so that's what I feel like, we're a family. So stay encouraged and believe that, you know what, take it one day at a time, and God is going to provide. So, thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. We appreciate your sharing with us tonight. Someone asked me today, you know, why are we gathering here for these opportunities to talk a little bit about our school? And the one thing we want to do is to share with you some information as to what we've been doing the past year, bring you up to date again. And we want to encourage you and hopefully inspire you to be a part of what we are doing in the future. And one of the things that we are doing is we're trying to secure the future for the next generation. Now, I hate to admit it, but I'm kind of the older generation. I know I don't look it, but I am. And we have to think about the future. And obviously, it is God's work to secure the future. But He gives us wisdom to make plans. And as we make plans, He is the one who will determine whether those plans come to fruition. So that is what we're trying to do. And, when the Lord is looking to secure the future of anything, He uses people. Doesn't He? He uses people. And so that's why we want to share with you, because you are a part of the school family. And we know that its future is dependent upon people like you as we look to the future. One of the things that's important when we look ahead is that we remember to look back. Now, some people say, well, Tim, you're always looking back. Well, I'm not really, but the past always gives me courage to look ahead. Now, for some people, maybe their past isn't that bright. Maybe they feel, oh, I don't like to look back. I only want to look forward. But when I look at the Scriptures, I see ample times there where God reminds us to look back at what He has accomplished. And that should increase our faith and help us, because the past is part of our story. Tonight, all of us here have a story. If we could all take the time and just have everybody get up and tell their story, it would be pretty fascinating, wouldn't it? My story isn't all that dramatic, my past. My dad died 1.5 years ago, and he was a very important figure in my life because he was involved in the same kind of work I did. He was in Christian education. And so that is my past, and his work in this field of Christian schooling was very crucial to me as I was growing up. And it helped shape a lot of my desire to pursue this particular profession later on in life. Well, this school has a lot of stories. And we sometimes call them milestones. And there's some particular times in the life of this school where we have seen in a mighty way God's provision. And some of you have heard those stories, and you're probably saying, I don't want to hear them again. But you're going to get to hear them again anyway. And I think it's important to remember the people who started this school way back in 1972. So we have been around a while. We're not the oldest school on the block, but we have been around for 42 years. We start our 43rd year right now. And this school was founded in East Long Meadow. It wasn't here. So if you're new to the school, this school used to be called the East Long Meadow Christian Day School. And it was over there where it was founded by a group of men and women, primarily from the First Baptist Church in East Long Meadow. Not all of them went to that church, but they set the school up as an independent school, and that's where it was housed for the first few years. There's a basement and the first floor of that church. By the way, that church still is there. And we're thankful for them. They have blessed us in many ways. So that's where the school started in 1972, and it had just elementary grades initially, and it was, I think, a board that had a great vision looking ahead, because they had a desire to see a school that would encompass all the grades, all the way through grade 12. And so that was where it started. And I'm sure that when they were putting this together, they probably didn't envision the fact that we might be here today. Even though this building was here and this land was here, I have doubt that they ever thought that the school would actually ever be here. But they did have a vision for Christian schooling. And then this was the old Baptist church, and that was where they had been prior to 1972. We used to have a belfry, and that's another story. But that became a high school, and that's where our high school was for about 4 years, back in the early 80s. Until 1985, our high school was in that building. and the elementary was in this building. And so that was the vision that happened. The old building was turned into a bunch of classrooms. Those were administrative offices and bathrooms there, that wing that we built onto the side, and that's where the school was. It's the East Long Meadow Christian Day School. And we outgrew that, and we needed more space. And so we began to look for a place to go. In 1985, we purchased this place that we're in now. I remember hanging that sign way back then. Our sign today looks a little bit different than that. But that was a great time in the history of this school when we were able to purchase this facility. It was appraised at $1.8 million. It wasn't even for sale. And God opened up the opportunity for us to buy this property, 25 acres of land, in a very good area of Springfield. And it was already a school. And it was built in the early 60s, so it wasn't in relatively good shape. And so we had that privilege of being able to purchase this. And you know, if I had the time tonight to tell you the story, last night I went to visit someone, Gary Coombs and I, Gary back there. We went to visit a family to ask them to support our project. And I told them the story of how this was purchased, and they were quite amazed at how God opened up a lot of different doors to make that a reality. So that happened in 1985. That was a real milestone in the life of the school. Having driven by this property for many years before we bought it, I never envisioned that we would own it. I used to think, boy, that'd be a great place for a Christian school, but I can't imagine if we would ever be able to afford that. Well, the next milestone after 1985 was 1990, and our school became accredited. First of all, we were accredited by the Association of Christian Schools International. That was in 1990. And that same year, we also were accredited by the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. And we were the only school that had that dual accreditation that was a Christian school back in 1990. Let me just say that I had a great faculty because that was a lot of work to do that. But we were able to accomplish that in 1980 and 1990. And that was a wonderful time in the life of our school with a wonderful faculty who committed a lot of time and energy to make that happen. That was a real milestone in the school. Then, around the early 1990s, 93, 94, we didn't have any place to play any sports because if you look behind the school, that was all woods, and it all went downhill. And we had lots of land, but no place to play because it was all woods. And so in 1994, I remember sitting with a man who happens to even be here tonight. I didn't know he would be. So I'll just tell you, Mr. Ondrick was, he was a great help to me for many years, still is. He and his wife Pam, and their children have all gone to the school and graduated. But I remember talking to Taj that night. I think we had lunch and we were talking about the fields and what we needed to do. And, you know, it's going to be a lot of work. Take all the trees down, you've got to move a ton of ground. And it just seemed like, well, I don't know how that'll ever happen. But I can remember as we're sitting there talking, and Taj is the guy that gets his napkin up and begins to sketch and so forth. And, you know, he kind of looked at it and thought, you know, this is doable. And so when we left that day, he said, well, when are we going to start? And I'll never forget that. And we did. We started to do that. And so today, we have those fields all done. And that was a tremendous milestone in the life of this school from a parent who was committed to what we were all about. And so baseball and tennis and all of those kinds of things are all that milestone in the life of the school. Then, we also had other people who donated. Other milestones in the life of the school was that our oil was donated to the school for years. We never had to pay for oil. For over 20 years, a parent paid for all the oil. It's a lot of money. In a young school, that was a huge gift. We also had, the same parent also gave us flowers for many, many years that we could sell on Saturday in May and have a plant sale. What a tremendous help that was to a school that didn't have any money. And so we were able to run that plant sale. That was a milestone in the life of the school. And then in 2003, we were able to add an addition, the elementary addition, where the elementary children are going to school now. This was a groundbreaking picture. And we started that in July, and by the end of October, we had completed it. And again, a lot of donations to make that happen, a lot of parental involvement in doing a lot of the project, and we were able to do that. That was a real milestone. And then in 2008, the building you're enjoying tonight, this room, that wing, was added in 2008, about 18,000 square feet. And we were able to do that again with the work of volunteers, a lot of donated things to make it a reality. And we were able to enjoy this great new addition that we have today. That was in 2008. And how all of that is accomplished is by people. God uses people. He never just drops it out of the sky. And one of the great gifts that we've had is, over the years, is faculty. Many of our faculty have been here for a long, long time. And usually they leave because they retire, or they get married, or they have a child. They just seem to stay around. And we have wonderful parents who volunteer regularly to help our school in so many ways, very committed to our mission. We have parents who have given us great students, and that's why we're here, right? We're not here to provide a job for adults. We're here because we want to have students here and to have the privilege of educating them. And so these are just a few of the milestones in the life of this school that are so huge when we look back. And some of us look back, who've been here during all of that time, and wonder, how did that ever happen? Because in the moment that you're in, you have your doubts. You think, well, this would never occur. And then the Lord surprises us in ways that we could never imagine. And so we're very thankful for that opportunity to have worked with so many great people. God accomplishes all these things through His people. And all of these memories or milestones that we have are very important. And you might not have been a part of that. You might be here tonight and say, well, I wasn't here for any of that. But you're here now, and you can be a part of the future. And the next milestone that the school will have as we remain faithful to the mission. So those are milestones. But in the life of a school, there are also stages. And I think there are really three stages that affect an institution. The first one, the first stage that we think about, the first generation. We're past that. The first generation of people that were part of this school, they were part of the growth of it. And there was a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of energy, and the excitement was there, a lot, just everybody pitching in to make it happen. And there's not a lot of people left from that era. And so we've moved beyond that initial excitement of a new school trying to make these large changes over a short period of time. So now you kind of get to the next generation, and I think this is the generation that we are currently in. And sometimes this is one of those stages where some of the excitement wears off. You know, it comes across like we're just sort of maintaining things. And that's good. You do need to maintain and preserve what you have. Some of the stories may go away. Some of the milestones no one knows about. And so you lose a little bit of the history. New people come in, they don't know the stories. They don't know the sacrifice. They don't know the investment. And that's one of the dangers of this period, this second generation. They have not had that hands-on experience like the first generation. It's a dangerous stage, because I think the second stage here, the second generation, is where an institution can either continue to flourish or it can go the other way. And across the United States today, there are many institutions that are closing. You know, they're in this third generation, they're in this stage of decline. But we're in this second generation stage, and we don't want to just sort of maintain, we want to continue to grow. We have a vision for the future, and we don't want people to lose interest in the school. And so this is a real area of struggle, I think, for many institutions, and I think it's a little bit for us. So we get to some of the challenges that we face, and what do we do with the challenges that we face? Well, one of the challenges that we have is that there is not a lot of support for Christian schooling in this community. You know, there have been a number of Christian schools closed in the last 10 years. Someone said to me, well, that's good for you. I said, no, it's not good for me at all, because that shows you that the interest in Christian schooling is declining. So that's not a good thing. And so we, as a school in our second generation, do experience some of that. Most people that we talk to don't really understand why you're here. They don't get the mission of our school. They think it's just a little school, it's safe, and I always go, there's no safe school. Right? Not guaranteed that. Only God can take care of us in that department. But most people don't get the mission of what we are all about. So that's a real challenge for us as we look forward and try to secure the future of our school. When we're out about talking about Christians, they don't even know how to converse about Christian school because they never hear about it. We've experienced that in many churches it's never mentioned. People don't talk about it. And so I was in a church with our missions person, D. Richards, back in June, and our sense was that there hadn't been any conversation really in that church too much about Christian schooling. We had an opportunity to share a little bit, and that was a wonderful thing for us as a school to be able to do that. And then another challenge is enrollment tends to stagnate. It just sort of just plateaus. It stays the same. And we've been there. And we recognize that we need an army of people, and that army really is in our school, to help us with that challenge. And I think the last one, in the second generation, is that I think a lot of parents who are involved in schooling like this assume that the school will always be available. You can't really assume that. There's plenty of history to show across the United States, as I said, in the schools that we are connected with. We're connected with the Association of Christian Schools International. In just the last 4 years, there's been a 10% decline in Christian schools. That's a big number if I laid out all the numbers. So I think sometimes people think, well, it's just, you know, you pull up, there's a big building, and it seems like there's heat and lights around, there's books, there's teachers, and it'll just always be that way. That's not the case. There's a lot of stuff going on to make sure that the lights are on, that the heat is on, that there are teachers, and that the driveways are plowed, and et cetera, et cetera. So those are just some of the challenges that you and I face as we look to the future. They're not certainly insurmountable, and we have to figure out ways to address those things more effectively as we look ahead. And so as we want to secure the future, we decided that we would get some help looking ahead for our school. And so we did engage a company, a Christian company, that could give us some insight into our school. We wanted someone to take a look at us who was objective. I'm not the most objective person, you know, when I look at the school. I try to be, but, you know, I have my biases. I've been here 36 years, so, you know, I do have a little bit of a bias. But I recognize that there are weaknesses in the school and there are strengths, and we need to discern how other people look at our school. So we engaged some help as we looked at the future. And we wanted to discover just where we stood with our parents. and with our alumni and with the faculty and all of the groups that connect with our school. And so we did that, and we did a discovery phase, and that was where we tried to pinpoint the things that made our school unique, and what were the wants, the concerns, and the needs of the current parents within our school. And a lot of people were surveyed. I don't know, you might have been one of those who were surveyed, I don't know. I didn't get to find out who the people were. So we went through a survey phase, a discovery phase, to learn about what people really thought. And once that was all accumulated, all that information, then we went through this stage, it's called the articulation phase, and we looked at how we could better present our school. And one of the things that we did was we rebrand the school. We changed the name a little bit, we have a different logo, and we were going to address some of the concerns that people had about our school. So we wanted to develop a new brand. By the way, how many people saw the sign tonight? Well, last week, if you were here, we had all the television crew. Three television stations here for that. And that was kind of neat when we pulled the tarp off of the sign. Then the third area was the creative phase. And this was where we rolled out the whole new design. We didn't roll it out, but we created it. We call that phase the branding phase, which we've been working on. And lastly, the deployment phase, which is sort of what we're in now, where we rolled it out. We haven't rolled it all out. We still have the website complete, but we should have that done within a week. And so we tried to take an objective look at our school to figure out what we could learn about our school. And the real reason for doing it was to address one major question. And we sometimes call it the value proposition question. And that's the question, if I am a Christian parent, why should I send my child to PVCA rather than a public school or other private school? Now, you're here tonight. You've put your child in the school. So most of you have here. That's a question that you have to ask. And every year, a parent really asks themselves that question. Do I put my child, my teenager, back in the school? It's a huge question. Now, as you think about that, what we learned from our research, we learned five things. And we learned on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the highest, when we took all of the data that was accumulated, we learned that parents put their children in our school for emotional and physical safety. That was 1. That scored a 5. Caring teachers and staff, that scored a 5. Biblical perspective was a 4. Close to a 5, might be just a matter of semantics, I don't know. But it rated very high. Why people put their children in the school. Now, you have to remember that the mission of this school really centers around biblical perspective. There are really 2 kinds of schools. I know there's lots of schools, but there are really 2 kinds. There are schools that invite God off the sidewalk and bring him into the classroom, okay? Right? That's one kind of school. That's what we are all about. So we are inviting God, who is the one who has made all things. Therefore, he has the right to interpret all things. And so Christian men and women who subscribe to that truth are able to interpret God's world from God's perspective. That's why we're here. Now, these other 2, emotional, physical safety, caring teachers and staff, that's all good stuff. And I think there's a high element of that, definitely. As long as the physical safety point doesn't get driven too far, because in this culture, obviously that can be changed in heartbeat, as we've seen over the past few years. Caring teachers and staff, absolutely. Having had 5 of my children go through the school, certainly appreciate the impact of teachers on the lives of my young children. And now I have grandchildren. And I ask my children, well, why are you putting your children in this school? And they give me these reasons. They want to have their children taught the truth from a biblical perspective. They want them to understand the world. And secondly, they want men and women who can teach their children and model Christ to their children and care about it beyond just the simple teaching of math and science and English and so on. So those are all values. Now the second side here, this cost side, those all scored 3s. Academic program, sports program. In the academic program, it scored a 3 because the problem was at the high school they wanted more advanced placement courses. We heard that over and over. In the sports program, the thing that we heard the most of, we don't have a gymnasium. Well, we have one, but it was built for girls basketball in the early 60s. Now, I have to confess that basketball for girls changed when I was in high school. How many know that? And back when I was in high school, which was from 66 to 69, the girls, all of 5 of them could not go the full length of the court. Okay? So there was always 2 on one end that had to stay. They could only dribble the ball 3 times before they had to pass it. So the game was considerably slower. That's why in our gym there's glass on one end. Who would think of putting glass in the gym underneath the basket? Ask my son, he went through that glass before we had a wall. So we learned that in the high school, that's where the issue was. And in the high school particularly, we needed a better facility. Those were the 2 things that came out of that study that were the largest concerns. And so some people might say, well, that's sort of a cost issue. And so if people look at your school, they look at the value, those first 3, and those are reasons why they put their children in the school. But then they can look at the other side as their kids get older in particular, and they might think, well, I don't know. Now, if they really understood biblical perspective, those other 2 might not be such an issue. My dad started a Christian high school in Maine back in 1958. And so there were no elementary schools in Maine until 1958. Dad started one of those in another town that wasn't anywhere near where we lived. So when I went to an elementary school and a junior high school in the town that we lived, and then when it came to be high school, where do you think I was going to go? It wasn't even an issue. I didn't get to say, well, Dad, I'd really like to go to public high school. It wasn't even on the table. It wasn't even a discussion. It wasn't even anything I dared to ask. You know why? Because of biblical perspective. That was why the school started. So at the 8th grade, I liked basketball, and I was a relatively decent player, and they wanted me to play in the local public high school. And there was a fair amount of pressure to do that. We had a good 8th grade team, and kind of wanted to move that team up through. And I never ever asked my dad to go. Because I knew where I was going to go to school. And I was glad that I did. I loved it. But did we have the best academic program in that high school? No. It was a relatively young high school. For a gymnasium, we had an old Quonset hut that had been torn down, gotten from the Navy, moved about 200 miles, and they constructed it on the campus, and that's what we played in. Cement floor, no glass backboards. We played basketball. I could have played in a local school that had a beautiful gym. But that wasn't an option. But you see, we live in a different culture today. And I said some of the challenges that you and I face is that there's no dialogue about Christian schooling. So most people don't, it doesn't even cross their mind. So they send their children to whatever school they live in, whatever town they live in, because they are not really centered on that right there. Now, I've looked around the area and I see that most every town in the area has built a new high school for students. And they're multi-million-dollar high schools. And we can't compete with that. And they have a lot of your tax dollars, and they're able to do a whole lot here because they have a lot of students. Now, why can't we do more with academics at the AP level? The reason is I need more students. So, give me another 50 students, I can have more AP classes. But I can't offer them for one student. It's not very cost effective. So we aren't able to do that as much as we'd like to. We are looking at some other creative means by which we could do some of that, but it's a challenge. So what happens is that when you look at the value proposition, why should you put your child in a Christian school, that sometimes the cost side will outweigh the value side. And our task is to try and move everything over to the value side. So as we think about it, we want to try to take the academic program and the sports program with as much resources as we have and move it all over onto the value side. Does that make sense?
Amen.
That's what we want to do, and that's our plan. So one of the reasons, things that we are seeking to do right now is to address the sports program and the athletic program with the new facilities that we are proposing that we build. So that's how we're trying to address the value proposition. So it was obvious to the board and to those of us who work here at the school that there were some things that we could do to move forward and try to address these needs. So we do look at the whole issue of how can we do more of the academic side for the high school in particular, and the advanced placement courses that we want to add. And then the second thing was, how can we improve our facilities with very limited resources? And so that's what we've set out to do. So we want to build on our strength. We think those are great, and we continue to work with those and make sure that they're stronger than ever. And how can we strengthen these going forward as we seek to secure the future? So our proposal was that we would add a gymnasium. And so if you look at this diagram, I don't know if you're good with diagrams, but if you came in tonight off the parking lot, you came in there, okay? And you probably came down and walked like this, over here, okay? Or the front of the school, which is over here, this would be the front entrance. You might come in through there. Okay? So you got oriented? So right now, this is the wing that we built in 2008. This was the one we built in 2003. And what we propose is that we would join the whole plant together and put a gymnasium out here with locker rooms and an exercise weight room area for helping our athletes and students. This would involve some classroom space that we could add here. And we would take the library, which is over here, and move the library over here and create a more modern media center for our students so we have better access to the internet and so forth. You'll notice that we also have this little area here, because initially we wanted to do a number of things. We wanted to add on a stage to the end of this. This is our current gymnasium. And if you've ever been to anything there for a program, you're going to have crowded this. We would like to add a stage here and turn this whole area into a performing arts center. to do all of this, move the library down here, create this lobby, and add all of this, it came in at about $7.8 million. So we went back to the drawing board, said, well, maybe we can't swing that, but maybe we could do just this section right here. And this. Because once we close this in, we can't go in there and do that. Because we have no way to get in. So we have to do this now. And this would create a lobby so that when this becomes a performing arts area, we have a lobby here for people to congregate and so forth, which currently we don't have. So that's what we've been doing, is looking at how we could do this space. And so we rebid it, and this area to do all of this and excavate it and so forth is about $5.8 million. Okay? And so during the last year, we've been quietly trying to secure funds to build this area. Now, if you came in this lobby, in this hallway here tonight, you notice how it was all torn up. There's some asbestos down through there, as there is in every old building. And it's not a danger, it's all encapsulated, but if we were to do any construction, we would have to tear that all out. So because we have a lot of faith, we went ahead and tore that all apart and took out all of the asbestos, thank you. We took it all out while there were no students in the school. So that's all been taken care of, there's nothing there anymore. And we could put a floor back down, but we'd like not to. We'd like to continue on with our project. And so that's what we're working to do right now. So that's all been taken care of. So you ask, well, why build phase 3? And there's a lot of good reasons to build it. Obviously, we think that having that capacity for our children and our young people fulfills our mission, because we want to develop our students in the spiritual, intellectual, social, and physical, just as Jesus was. And he reminds us that in Luke chapter 2. So that's important to our mission. We want to improve our athletic program because we can't use a current gym for high school. So we have to rent a gym, and we're thankful for the use of the First Baptist Church's brand new gymnasium. But it's not easy to do it off-site like that. Thirdly, we'd like to do more with our physical education program. And so if we have the appropriate space and equipment, we can do that. This was huge. There's families right now, practices. I talked to a family last night, and their son literally dropped out of basketball because of having to travel so far to participate. By the time they got home at night, it was too late. And so if we could do it here, run practices at the same time, we would help parents a great deal. This is another goal that we have, is we have a summer program. So we use this facility year-round. And it would help a lot in terms of our ability to help the youth of the area, and it would also help us financially as a school. We could have space for larger events here on campus. We do get asked many times for that, but we don't have a place that's large enough for them to host a large event. And we would also, as I've already mentioned, be able to improve our library media center, and it would provide some additional classrooms for the elementary if we need them. So that was one of the reasons that we wanted to do this phase 3. So what will we have to do to accomplish it? Well, the board has a vision, and I think this vision is important for you to understand looking ahead. I was asked this question last night. What is the vision for the school? Where do you want to go? And this is a major point. We want to provide a Christian education for every student whose parents desire a Christian education for their children and are committed to pursuing it. We think that Christian children should have an opportunity to come to a Christian school. We want to maintain our faculty, our quality faculty, who are well-equipped professionally, which we think they are, but we aren't compensating them as equitably as we should be. Our starting teacher, no experience, out of college, makes a little over 22,500. That's not a lot, no. That's almost poverty. And those people tend to hang around here for a long time. But this is a huge issue, and so we want to address enrollment because that is directly tied to enrollment. What we can compensate our faculty for. 3, we want to provide a rigorous and robust educational program. That's what we're committed to, and that's some of the things that we're addressing. That also is somewhat tied to enrollment. And lastly, we want to develop the next generation in order to pass on the Christian heritage. Aren't we supposed to pass on the heritage? And so we do that through Christian families and Christian schools and churches working together to pass on the heritage. So that's our vision. The board is committed to that vision. And how we want to accomplish that is by trying to get our student body to 500 students. If we complete this project, we can handle 500 students. We're about halfway there, a little more than halfway there. So we have lots of room, and we know that there are people out there who should be here. We want to complete phase 3. That's the gym part. We also would like to do the stage, but we still are going to need a little more money to accomplish that. We want to compensate all of our faculty and staff equitably. And lastly, we want to create an endowment. Because if we could create an endowment, and I put in at least $5 million, that's probably not enough. I noticed Cathedral is trying to get $10 million. I don't know how they're doing, but you know, if you can take 5% off of $5 million, that's about $250,000 a year that you could invest in helping students attend your school, which allows you to address compensation, program, all of those things. So if we could create an endowment to ensure the size, quality, and diversity of the student body. So those are the mission statements that go along with the vision of what we're trying to achieve as a school. Those are pretty lofty goals, but they're certainly reachable. Those are not beyond the capacity of the school if we have a lot of help and with God's provision. One of our board members said the other day, he says it often, he says, well, we shouldn't do anything unless we have counted the cost. It's a big deal. And of course, the scripture that he refers to is Luke 14, where it says, suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Will he not first sit down and estimate the cost to see if he has enough money to complete it? Or if he lays the foundation and is not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule him, saying, this fellow began to build and was not able to finish. So it's important, and the board has been very careful as we have looked at the future and what we can do. And we're looking at the future to understand what we can do with the Lord's blessing. So what is the goal? Well, the goal, as I said, is going to be about $5.8 million to do that phase 3. And what we need is about 1.4. Actually, I think that number is closer to 1 million right now. That sounds like a lot of money to me, you know, I think about it. And yet, on the other hand, when we bought this facility, I told you that it was estimated to be worth $1.8 million. The original building with the acreage. $1.8 million. That was a lot of money in 1985. We actually were able to buy it for half of that. We paid $900,000. That woman who ran the school, she was a nun. She was willing to sell it for half. Pretty amazing, isn't it? But $900,000 for a school that had like 80 families in it, 85 families, was a lot of money. And I remember when we were trying to do it, I wasn't allowed to tell anybody what we actually bought this school. We never told the parents what we were buying. I just said, you're going to like it, but I can't tell you what it is because she didn't want anyone to know until it was all signed, sealed, and delivered. And we had a meeting like this of all the parents one night, and I told them I need $300,000 in pledges before I walk out of here. If we're going to get this school that I know you'll like, but I can't show it to you. We walked out of there that night with $300,000. I didn't believe it would happen. It did. And so that's our goal, and we're very, very close. We have a construction company that has all ready to put the shovel in the ground as soon as we say go. We could do that right now. But we need to get to the goal to make it a reality. So you could help. You could do that. There's no one in the room that can't do that. Right? That is so important. That's the most important part, because we are told, first of all, to pray for everything. And I hope that you do that. So you could pray that God's will would be done. Secondly, as I was explained to you, that enrollment is so critical to our school, so important. You could help us with that. In fact, we're going to pass out a form tonight. And on there, you could note even a family that we could ask. Let's say there was 200 families in our school, and every family in the school came up with one other family that's not here. And let's say that as we worked at how we might reach out to those families, that would be 200 families. But what if we got just 10%? Well, that's 20 families. Just like that. You know something? That wouldn't cost us a dime to do that. Because we don't have a lot of money to invest in advertising, plus advertising doesn't really work that well. Guess what we discovered about advertising? Word of mouth is the primary means by which people come to our school. A satisfied customer, most important. So you could assist with recruitment as we look to the future. And thirdly, you could provide funding. You say, well, I don't have any money. Well, I don't know what you have. I come from a long line of farmers. And my father and mother both grew up on farms up in northern Maine. I remember growing up, every time you asked any of my uncles how was the potato season, they were also dairy farmers, but they grew potatoes. I can never remember them saying they had a good season. They all drove nice cars, they all lived in nice homes, they lived very well, but they never had a good season. I thought that was kind of funny. So, you know, no one ever had any money, but God has all the money. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. Everything I own is God's, and everything you own is God's. He just happens to own it, right? It's not yours. So you could just give a gift. And we've had a lot of those. People who are committed to this, they're excited about this mission, and they've just given us a gift. And it's sitting there. We can't spend it because we haven't been able to put a shovel in the ground. And then there's another group that said, well, I couldn't give you a lot right now, but I could give you some if I spread it out. And so we've had a number of people pledge over 5 years to give us so much a year. And that way they can be engaged in the program. And no amount is too little, because it takes a lot of participation to get to our goal. And so we want everybody to have some skin in the game. Whether it's $5 or $50,000, it doesn't matter. We had one of these meetings last week. We had 100 people here. And one fellow signed one of those cards on the way out the door. And he wanted to give us $60,000. Just that night. Over time. He said, I can do that. So I don't know what you can do, but we are very close to being able to achieve this goal, and so we would like to get there. So let's say $1 million, if you had 200 persons who would give $1,000 for 5 years, that's $20 a week. So that's a lot. I know a lot of people who spend that who say they have no money. Dunkin' coffee, Starbucks coffee, which is more money, and pizza, you know, it doesn't take long to spend $20, right? And that's $4 a day. Not a lot. Well, that would get us to $1 million. Now, some people could do more, some could do less, but the point is, with everybody participating, all of, not just the families, we've gone to people who are not part of just our immediate family, we're way out beyond that. But our goal is that we could raise that. So last week, I told you our last meeting, that I had gotten up on Monday morning and I was kind of feeling a little bit low. I don't know, I've been up and down, because you know, this is hard work. And I've been reading in the book of Exodus, which can be a little bit dry. But sometimes I was reading, you know, when they were fabricating the tabernacle for the Israelites to worship in, and God gave them very specific rules to follow, guidelines to build this thing. And you read through it, I mean, you leave anything untouched. There's going to be a specification for everything. It's like working with a building committee. Everything counts. And I was reading it and thinking about what we were trying to do, you know, and wondering. And I came across these verses, and it was just the providence of God as I was reading. And one of them was in Exodus 35. It says, from what you have, because they had to fund this project, by the way. They had to pay to build this thing. And so God said to Moses, he says, from what you have, take an offering for the Lord. Everyone who is willing is to bring to the Lord an offering. That jumped out at me. Everyone who's willing. So I don't know what the population was at that time. I mean, there's been estimates of what it was, but not everybody gave, I'm sure. But everyone who was willing. So it's always, and that's great, because you only want people who are willing. Then the next verse that jumped out at me later on in that passage, it says that everyone who was willing and whose heart moved them. And I got thinking about that, and I said, well, I can't move anybody's heart, that's God's work. So that took a little pressure off, right? It's not I can't move anybody. But God can move a person's heart. So everyone who was willing and whose heart was moved came and brought an offering to the Lord. So then I kept reading, and I was wondering, well, how's this going to wrap up? And in chapter 36, it says the people are bringing more than enough for doing the work the Lord commanded to be done. Bringing more than enough. Can you imagine having to say to people, too much. Stop. We're bringing way too much money. We can't spend it. We don't need it. I've lived a long time. I've never been in a situation where I've heard that said. In church, in school, in anything. You? Too much. Don't bring any more. Must have been a wonderful day. It's pretty exciting. I bet you those people who were building that temple, they must have been pretty excited, because they were bringing gold, they were bringing just wood, they were bringing the best they had, and giving it. So, what do you think? If it's God's will, we can move forward. We can secure the future. The good news about our builder is, you know, most of the time builders don't hold their price for more than 30 days or so. And our builder said he would hold that price till the end of December. That was pretty good news. We didn't anticipate that. And our current donors who have committed to the project are still on board, even though we haven't done anything yet. And so the challenge that we have is that can we make up this difference? And not just to build a building, but we want to provide the best school, the best education that we can. Not for anybody's glory, but for God. Because we are trying to educate God's kids. And so we want them to have the best Christian schooling that we can provide with the resources at our disposal. And those aren't unending. We don't have Uncle Sam. We just have you. And friends, and alumni, and grandparents, and And you know, that's how the school has existed over the years. It's people who have committed themselves to this school and have given. I can tell you lots of stories. The school isn't here because of just tuition dollars. Tuition covers 80%. You know, everybody's on financial aid. Whether they apply for it or not, everybody's getting 20% cut. And how do we make that happen? By men and women who are committed, who continue to give over and above tuition, or who give gifts after they've even left the school but are still committed. We have a family who lives in New Mexico. Kids graduated from school. They still support the school. I could pick up the phone today and say, could you help me with this? And they would say, absolutely. So there they are. And we have a lot of people, some sitting in this room. So that's our challenge. And I hope that you are excited about the prospect of moving the school forward, looking to the future. And we're going to pass out a commitment sheet. You can sign up for something on there, even if it's just to pray. And you can do that, but we would like you to look at that. If you might want to go home and think about it, pray about it. We would like to talk to you about it if you would allow us to, and share with you the vision. And together, we can get there to the goal, and maybe this time next year, we would have that facility in place. That's our plan. So God willing, we all pull together, and that's where we'll end up. Okay? Thank you. Michael, I'm going to let you come and give your remarks. Michael is an alumni, graduated 2003, and his wife and him are expecting a baby in August. Michael also coaches our girls' basketball team and was blessing to our students.
Well, as you know, my name is Michael Brand, graduated in 2003, and I was kind of asked just to share the impact of PVCA. Is it PVCA, not PVCS? God, I'm getting good. And just the impact that it's had on my whole life. And I was reading a verse that a lot of us may be familiar with, and it's found in the book of Hebrews in the 12th chapter. And it's the first verse, and just kind of want to share with you what it says. It says, therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. And the writer of the book of Hebrews is talking about the Christian life, and that it's really about a race, it's about a journey, and how it's about endurance, it's about hardships that you're going to face. And a lot of the words that I highlighted had something to do with the impact that PVCA has had in my life. And the first word I see is cloud. And in the Greek, it's the word nephos. And if you've ever gone outside and you've looked up in the sky and you've just seen those like clouds almost building off of each other, that's what it's talking about. It's talking about a massive billowing of clouds. And the writer is comparing that to Christians who are going through a hardship. They're saying that when you go through hardships, that you have this massive cloud, this massive group of people who have gone on before you, and he uses that as a word to encourage us. And I began to think of the people that God had placed in my life during my time here at Pioneer Valley. I thought of the teachers. I remember as I graduated, it's not, the teachers just don't say goodbye and kick you out. They're with you even after. And I remember sitting in an art class in my first freshman year in college, and we got a call, my twin brother and I got a call that my 9-year-old brother had been something had tragically happened to him. He was in the hospital. I remember going to the hospital and we found out that he had passed away. And the very first people who we saw in the waiting room was Mr. and Mrs. Dove. Right away. And I think back on those times and I realized that it really is about the people who surround you. And I see sacrifice. My mom was a single mom and she adopted 8 kids. And at one time she almost had all of us in the school. I had the privilege of coming from preschool and graduating in 12th grade. But I saw and I see even more now the sacrifice that it took. She didn't have nice dishes. She didn't have a nice car. She gave up things because she knew the vision of the school and what it would be in our lives. And I see that even more now. And I see that it's a preparation. We go on to see words here. We see the word everything that hinders. The word hinders is onkos. And in the Greek, it's a word that means any kind of weight. So when an athlete begins to train, they shed off excess weight, anything that would hinder them in the race that they're supposed to go into. And I started thinking about that and thinking about, no one just wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to run a marathon next week. And you can say that, but you're not going to make it. I remember a